Windsurfing is it's terribly addicting, and I think part of the reason it is it's a really difficult learning curve. I would say in some ways kiting is a little bit of a quicker learning curve than windsurfing, but it's probably a little more forgiving on the body.
Just
Which,
because
kiting?
Of the dynamics
you're kiting, because you're separated from the kite's up in the air, whereas windsurfing you're hooked in at waist level directly to the sail. But either way, they're pretty demanding. They're pretty exciting sports, though. And we happen to live right in the epicenter of the windsurf and kite scene here in the U.S. I'm Tom Anderson, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show today. Man, we're going to learn a little bit about the Pacific Northwest. I've never really fished up there, but I want to. The Deschutes River, the John Day River, all of these places that I've heard about, some really incredible stuff. And I've got a friend, Tom Anderson. He lives out there. He owns a company called Burnewiin, and he's going to talk to us today about all kinds of stuff, the health of the salmon fishery, sturgeon fishing, all kinds of stuff. So buckle up and get ready for Tom Anderson. Tom, what's up? How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Tom?
Man, doing great. Tom and Tom.
Absolutely.
How's the weather out there where you are?
It's interesting. It's actually been really cool for this time of year for us. The Northwest is a hard thing to ask about weather because we're kind of on what's called the east slope of the Cascades. So usually it's very sunny, hot, and dry here.
Yeah.
All summer. And right now it's been incredibly windy, which is great for the windsurf kiteboard crowd.
Right. Yeah. And that's you, right? Do you like to do that?
I do. That's part of the reason I ever was originally out here, 30 years ago, was that scene specifically. But I don't really do it too much anymore. I'm kind of a little bit up there in my years, and it's probably good to stay away from.
So is there when I grew up, I like to water ski, competitive water skiing. So slalom course. And then I got into barefooting and all of these other things that are very harmful to your body. And then along comes a technological marvel called wake surfing, and which is much, much easier on your body. So is there kind of a step to where, or is it all or nothing for the kite surfing? Like, is there one that is way easier on the body than another? Do you go back to just the windsurfing on a board? Or is it?
It's interesting. Windsurfing is it's terribly addicting, and I think part of the reason it is it's a really difficult learning curve. I would say in some ways kiting is a little bit of a quicker learning curve than windsurfing, but it's probably a little more forgiving on the body. Just
Which,
because
kiting?
of the dynamics you're kiting, because you're separated from the kite's up in the air, whereas windsurfing you're hooked in at waist level directly to the sail. But either way, they're pretty demanding. They're pretty exciting sports, though, and we happen to live right in the epicenter of the windsurf and kite scene here in the U.S.
Yeah, and that's a particular canyon. Is that right?
It's called the Columbia River Gorge,
right?
And beautiful area. It's one of the only national scenic areas in the country. And it cuts a sea level path through the Cascade Mountain Range, which is, of course, a series of volcanoes all down the Pacific coast. And the cool, dense air on the coast puts pressure up against the coastal range. And then just east of us here, about 20 miles, is high mountain desert, which gets really hot, and that air rises. And so the only sea level path through the Cascades is the gorge. And so it's literally a wind funnel. It's pretty cool dynamic.
Yeah. And so is there good fishing there? Right in the windy area?
It's fantastic. Unfortunately, the wind kind of messes with it a fair bit. But we have, historically, the Columbia River was one of the primary salmon fisheries in the country. And it's still a pretty impressive fish scene here, but there's a lot of, like everywhere, a lot of politics involved. And of course, here in the last century, there's, a lot of dams have been built that have turned it into a slow moving river at warmer temperatures, which isn't necessarily great for salmon.
No.
But there's still pretty incredible runs. As far as fishing, regulatory wise, it's a bit of a quagmire, like a lot of places. Unfortunately for us, it's not a huge destination fishing zone, just because you could show up here and get blown off the river for your whole vacation by wind.
Yeah.
So, but we have a lot of tributaries, of course. The big thing here really is the tributary fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the tributary fishing, that's where the salmon are?
Yeah, salmon in the main stem as well. But, the Klickitat River, for example, where I live, that's the longest undammed river in the Northwest, and it comes off of the glacial fields of Mount Adams. And there's a fish hatchery up at the mountain. They raise primarily Chinook, but there's also an incredible winter steelhead fishery there. They do close that down in the winter, though, to protect the breeding season. But most of the rivers up the Columbia system have, steelhead or Chinook fishery, as well as some incidental trout.
Yeah.
A lot of the trout might be steelhead smolt that you catch.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like the steelheading like in the winter?
I love it.
That's very addicting. I've never done it myself, but I know that the people that I know that are into it are like that. They're really into it. Like that seems like one of those things where that gets hold of you, and it's like permit fishing for us, or bone fishing or tarpon fishing, where it's just like you see people they go all in. It's all they can think about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty addicting. Here where we are in particular, the prime steelhead fishery is pretty much from July through November, with kind of height of it maybe September, October. So they're really summer run fish that breed in the winter. And then as you get more towards the coast, that's the classic, it's sleeting, raining, snowing out, and you're out there for hours freezing your hands off, floating a jig.
That's when it's just getting good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, the last time that we had lunch, you were telling me all about all the other recreational opportunities that you have there. I mean, mountain biking and the kiting and the fishing. And I mean, that's one area where you are is an area of the country that I have spent almost no time, maybe a couple trips here and there. But man, the way you were describing it, that sounded amazing. I guess I even forgot the skiing. What else do you like to do out there?
It's a pretty well-rounded place, and that's why so many people here in the Gorge, which is about an hour east of Portland, Oregon, where we're located. It draws people from all over the world. And, I really moved here back in the mid-90s. My first exposure here was to the windsurfing scene, and that's why I was coming out here on vacations. But I would have never moved here just for that. You've got such a well-rounded presentation. So one of the things I like to do a lot is mountain bike.
Yeah.
And the biking here is spectacular. I'd say here, Moab and Whistler are probably three of the premier areas in the country. You can do it year round. The ski area on Mount Hood, up at Timberline Lodge, which is where the movie The Shining was filmed.
Yeah.
That's open all year pretty much. So there's a lot of ski teams from around the world, Northern Hemisphere teams that spend their summers on Mount Hood training. There's the Wendell snowboard camp up there all summer.
Wow. And there's enough snow that you can ski there all year long?
Yeah, it's they closed down for a little while for maintenance and stuff, but it's it's all up above tree line on the Palmer Glacier Field. And of course it's a popular climbing destination as well to go summit Hood, but you go up through the ski area to do that. So back in the day when I was in my prime, the big thing was to do a 3-sport day. So you'd get up in the morning, go ski the morning until it was slushy. This is in June, July. Ski the morning till it was slushy, stop and pop a mountain bike ride on the way down the hill, and then windsurf all afternoon.
Nice.
It's just pretty spectacular area.
Yeah.
And then, the big draw anymore is really tourism based. It's, there's just an incredible amount of wineries here that people travel from, and it's a good day getaway from Portland. And, of course, right now that's, been put on a little bit of a damper with the situation, but it's okay by me.
Yeah. Well, it's probably a good time to spend some time in the woods, one way or another.
Absolutely.
Seems like, for social distancing and for just distancing yourself from everything that's going on. But man, what a recreational, incredible place that you live in. 3-sport day. That's pretty cool. I've always thought that, kiting is the perfect complementary sport to fishing in the Keys, because there's so many days where it's just too windy to fish, or your people don't want to go, and then you can go out and do the kites. And a lot of the fishing guides are way into that. I had little kids when that was first getting started, and just didn't fit into the life right then. But and most of my people were like, came all the way down here. We're going anyway. Okay, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going fishing anyway.
Yeah.
That's cool. So tell me about your company, Burnewiin.
Well, Burnewiin, it's we born and raised here in the Columbia Gorge. In some ways, for somebody from Florida, it might seem like a strange place for a company like ours to exist. But just like our sports availability here, our fishing and boating scene is quite varied. And the other kind of neat thing about this area is that because of the international draw with people who want to locate somewhere for lifestyle, there's an incredible plethora of talent and skill here in the Gorge, in the Northwest in general. So anyways, Burnewiin, which by the way is an old Gaelic term for blacksmith or craftsman, really kind of designed in the conception of our company to connotate this quality, kind of old world quality. With a lot of industries, especially in the hardware arena, there's kind of been a race to the bottom with a lot of things, whether it's tools or boat hardware or whatever. And so we wanted to represent something that was done a little bit more in an old school way, having to do with craftsmanship, quality, attention to detail, and so on. So that's the history of the name. But the reason we even exist was that most people, they want to be Tom Rowland and Rich Tudor every day, right? Or, Scott Walker or somebody every day. But the reality is we all, even my aluminum fishing boat I use here in the Columbia Gorge all the time, we do all kinds of different things on that boat.
Right.
Not only different types of fishing, but just recreating and hanging out. And it just seemed like in the marine industry, there had been a lot of real great innovation in terms of boats, boat propulsion, electronics, and then also the things we use on boats, fishing rods, fishing reels, downrigger, whatever it is, even recreational products, cruising products. And what we found was that in a lot of cases, people would design these really great products. And then the last thing they do is just figure out a way to mount it on a boat, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times those mounting systems were kind of an afterthought. They were already behind. You had to just get something to get it on the boat. And so Burnewiin really arose strictly from the need to create a nice, well-designed system that allowed people to reconnect different things to their boat, depending on what they were doing for the day. Now, the fact is we're primarily fishermen. But, here we might be oversized sturgeon fishing one day, salmon fishing the next day, bass fishing the next day. And if you live near the coast, you're going to be out running for tuna, in the late summer tuna season. Maybe throwing some crab pots or whatever.
Right.
So that's kind of why we even exist. But of course, we could talk forever about our products and what we do, but that's the concept of why we're here.
Yeah. Well, what was what you have is pretty cool. Like it's if you don't know about this company or this product, it's basically something old kind of reinvented. The old part is a rod holder. Like everybody's got rod holders on the boat, and they're basically just a hole in the boat with a tube in it, and you stick the rod in there and it pretty much holds it. But yours it's got a different design that allows for multiple accessories to be put on top of it very securely. Right? Is that fair enough?
That's absolutely fair. Yep.
Yeah. So what was the first thing that you designed this type of rod holder to hold?
Well, so we're really careful not to call our mounts a rod holder. They're mounts, really. They're a universal marine mount. And what we did was we didn't just piecemeal it. So we spent 3 years developing an entire product line, because if we're going to have somebody put one of our mounts in their boat, we wanted them to be able to actually have it be a versatile thing, right?
Yeah.
So a series of rod holders, adapters, so people could do things like downriggers. Honestly, in the Northwest, where people do use downriggers quite a bit, that's one of the most common entry points into our mounting system. Is you just don't want to take that downrigger plate and screw it to your boat permanently.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Myself, I don't really love downriggers, but occasionally you need them. And actually, we're seeing a lot more business out of Florida for people who do use them for trolling wahoo, for example. Um, and, what we were finding was that you throw a downrigger in a gimbal mount, traditional 30-degree rod holder, and you're breaking the gimbal pins at the bottom. I mean, I know so many people, myself included, before we existed, that have a bolt in there because they broke the factory pin. They're sloppy, they're a little loosey-goosey, right? So that's one common application. And then, quite frankly, the other one is if you all of a sudden, you're out on a Saturday, we're out albacore tuna fishing hardcore with a bunch of guys, and Sunday you just want to take somebody out for a cruise. You don't want all this fishing gear stuck on your boat all the time, right?
Right.
So that was really the impetus behind, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. Really, the 30-degree flush mount rod holder, they're just prolific. They're everywhere. Every boat builder puts them in the boat, whether customers want them or not. And you can go back years in the marine industry and find companies that have done surveys of their customers. A lot of them don't even use them. And in certain fisheries, you never use 30-degree rod holders. The rod's sticking straight up in the air. And, 30-degree rod holders are the whole reason bent butt rods even exist, because you need to get the rod in a position that it can work
right
for you. The rod is there to take up slack, right? Keep that line tight. And if the rod's sticking straight up in the air and you're fishing down at all, that's just not the right position. So they created bent butts to get the rod a little more horizontal to the water. So all of our rod holders that work in our mounts do that. They articulate horizontally a full 360 degrees, and then vertically quickly with a trigger to go from horizontal to the water to a full vertical in some cases, and at least 45 in others, like the ones you've used.
Yeah. No, they're great like that because, like you say, not everybody's got bent butt rods. I mean, we, Rich and I mostly are inshore fishermen that occasionally go out and deep drop and swordfish, and he's really gotten into the deep dropping for the barrel fish and the queen snappers and all the other tile fish and everything else that we can find out there. But that really sometimes requires like a whole new line of rods, like all the bent butts and everything like that, where it's not that the rods that we currently have aren't heavy enough. Like we have plenty of rods that are heavy enough, but they don't have the bent butt. So that's where we were started to use your rod holder and get that rod away from the boat and out in a horizontal position. And that has worked great.
Yeah, that seemed to be what, I went out on the boat one day with Rich, and we were, I guess, as you call it there, reef fishing, which is something I'd done way in the past down there in the Keys when I used to spend quite a bit of time there. It's really no different than the way we fish halibut off the Oregon coast. We pick a key spot. We set up a drift. We want to get just the right drift speed so you're covering some ground, but not too fast so you can keep your bait on the bottom. And when you're doing that, whether you're 200 feet deep like we were that day out of Isla Mirada or 800 feet deep off the Oregon coast, same technique. And it's really important that the rod be horizontal to the water. And, some people look at us, some of our high-end stainless products as big boat, Viking boat class products. But, on that 26-foot boat we fished that day down there, it really allowed us to get a nice big spread. So we're able to get, we were using long leaders, I think like 20-foot leaders that day with live bait fish.
Yep.
Maybe an 8-ounce lead or something, just tapping bottom.
Yep.
And just with the rock of the water, we could get it set just like we do for halibut here, so that the rod tips every now and then would indicate, that you were touching bottom a little here and there, and getting a good spread out. So the factory 30-degree rod holders that go in the back of the gunnels typically are pointing straight back, and then the rods are sticking up. And then as you drift, your lines are tangling in the outboards, and it's just not the right setup.
It's certainly not the right setup for that. I mean, it's pretty good for, the trolling and for dolphin and stuff like that. That seems to work fine. But in this situation, what I liked about it is we could utilize the rod holders in the front, and then we could really get spread out and have one of the bow mount rod holders in the same position. So we have two rods out, and that worked great. I'm interested with the halibut fishing because when I was a kid, I always liked flounder fishing. I thought flounders were really a cool fish, and they were very, they were way more aggressive than I thought they would be when I was first learning about flounders. I thought, these things are just like bottom dwellers. And so the halibut is basically the same fish that grows to really big sizes. Are they like super aggressive like that? I've never fished for them.
It's interesting. So we don't catch like when a lot of people think of halibut, they're thinking of, the big Alaskan barn door, right? The big 100-some pounder. They take a lot of hard cranking to bring up because they have so much surface area, right? They're just this big, broad kite. And what they'll do is go nose down and just sit there and just work against you. They're not big runners per se, but they're really hard crankers. I wouldn't say that they're exciting fish to fight. The bite's kind of neat. The bite can be this really soft bite. We have to be really sensitive not to disrupt it. But then once that goes, it's sort of game on.
Right.
But it's more of a heavy grind than it is an exciting fight.
And
not really rough.
You guys are fishing those in 800 feet of water, like roughly?
It depends. Yeah. So they have the openings here are weird, of course, but they have 3-day openings every so often until the Pacific fishery quotas are met. And some years that closes quicker than others. That's the sort of all depth season. So we'll be out in 500 to 850 feet of water. And then typically throughout the summer, you can do the 40 fathom fishery, which is 40 fathoms deep or less. It's all near shore. And in those cases, we might be fishing at 100 feet, 150, something like that. And
you say that your fish are not the size like the Alaskan ones. What's a good one in your area?
So opening day this year, we were out and you could just keep one each day per person. We had 6 guys in the boat. We each limited out. We actually released a number until we got ones we were happy with, which ranged from 38 to 46 inches about.
Okay.
Those are going to be in the mid 30 pound, 30, 40 pounds.
Yeah, that's a lot of meat. I mean,
it's a lot of meat. Yeah.
Those fish are mostly meat. Like, some fish are not. Like some fish, you get way more meat off some fish than others. And it seems like certainly the flounder, it's mostly meat. That's a good fish to eat. I love those things, man. But they seem to be aggressive because they're like not that good at catching stuff, I guess. So when something comes over, they've got to get it right now or it's gone. Like it's not not like a tarpon or a wahoo or something that's going to be able to chase anything down. It's like almost like a largemouth bass. It sits kind of and waits in ambush and then all of a sudden just has got to get it. And
absolutely.
So that results in usually a pretty good bite with the flounder. But those halibut, man, those things, that has got to be one of the best tasting fish ever. I don't know if it's
fantastic.
Yeah.
They call it the non-fish eaters fish. And there's really so many ways you can prepare it. And most people, I know fishermen who I always hate to hear they love fishing, but they hate eating fish. And I'm like, well,
really?
Yeah. There's salmon fisher people that I know of that they just fish all season because they like catching them. And it's cool because they'll get them to their friends and stuff, but I love them all.
Yeah.
But the fact is there's very few people who don't like halibut. It's kind of like walleye, right?
Walleye and like in the Keys, I would say that would be the yellowtail snapper or the hog snapper. Very light white meat with that you can make it taste like whatever it is you're cooking it with, whether that might be butter. It tastes like butter because you cooked it in a lot of butter, but the same kind of deal. Like in the Keys, man, if you're talking to somebody and they say they don't like eating fish, the fishermen there are almost like a challenge. Like you don't like eating fish because you've never had good fish. I mean, mostly what people get in the store has been sitting there for a little bit. It took a couple of days for it to get to the store. It's not perfectly fresh. You get something that was swimming 2 hours ago, or it was swimming 2 hours ago, and then you clean it and put it in the refrigerator and then eat it tomorrow. That's my favorite way to do it. Man, that's good. And you can make a lot of fish taste really good, but that halibut, that's gotta be, it's gotta be one of my favorite fish ever. When I went to Alaska, I think I got that everywhere it was served. After the first time, I was just like, I'll have the halibut again.
Yeah, I love it too. Lingcod's probably a close second to that in terms of coastal fish.
Yeah, lingcod. Yeah. There's a lot of fish, like they call the cobia a ling. Like and there's other fish that are called ling. I don't know where that came from. Why they would call?
I don't either. That's a good question. Yeah, they're pretty radical fish, though. I love lingcod. I mean,
how do you fish for those?
Pretty good. Same. It's pretty much so. What we do for lingcod is closer shore, whether it's up off of Vancouver Island or the Oregon coast or whatever. And you're bottom fishing with jigs and big rubber tails typically.
Oh,
so
nice.
You're literally jig fishing on rock piles, or like if you're near shore, you watch the big Pacific, the mountain spines that come out.
Yeah.
On the Oregon coast, you've probably seen them before. There's like Cannon Beach, which has the big haystack rock out in the ocean, and Pacific City, where the whole dory fishery fleet is.
Yeah.
So you just watch those, and typically out in the ocean, there's more of those that continue into the ocean, right? And so you fish those pinnacles. And
that's cool. And you're doing that with a medium, kind of medium heavy rod. Like, how big are these fish that you're catching?
Oh, you're happy if you get a 36-inch lingcod.
A 36-incher is like 15 pounds or 12 pounds or something?
Oh, no, it's I'd say 15, 18 pounds. Maybe.
Okay. And that's like with a big bass rod, like a grouper rod or something.
Yeah, pretty much like a medium reel. Heavy. It has to have a pretty typically conventional reel because you're constantly adjusting. It's a real jagged bottom.
Yeah.
If you're out with people who haven't done it much, you're just constantly getting hooked up.
That's fun.
And it's a real. Unfortunately, the guy that's piloting the boat typically isn't going to be fishing because it's just constant trying to keep the drift right. And you're typically going over these spires and humps. So as you're going on the rising side, you got a real potential for snagging, and you got to be on the bottom. They kind of live in the little holes, and kind of like what I remember about, barracuda in Florida. It's like they live in these little holes and things go by, right? But we're typically using a 12. I personally like a 16-ounce lead jig head with a giant hook and about a 8 to 10 inch, rubber tail.
Really? And those are as good to eat as halibut?
I think they're, I'd say, a very close second.
Really? Wow, that's cool. Mm-hmm. I like the method and the result of eating something like that. That sounds cool.
It's super fun, and then you get a bunch of it's the same spots typically that you're fishing for other rockfish like sea bass, black sea bass. So usually on our jigs, above the jig head, we'll tie a couple of shrimp flies.
Oh,
on some dropper loops.
Yeah, and
you'll double up or triple up on sea bass sometimes. And then you'll get a big ling on the bottom one. The ling will usually hit that big bottom jig, but the sea bass will hit those shrimp flies too.
So that sea bass is another really good eating fish. That's like you're going to have a good day if you go out and you catch all three of those.
Absolutely, especially if you drop your crab pots outside the jetty on the way out.
Oh, nice! Even more. It's like a bounty. You have a feast when you get home. That's super cool. It's
pretty neat. We almost always drop some crab pots when we go across the bar through the jetties, and it's usually your savers. So if you have a bad fishing day, you come in and pull up a couple pots full of crab.
And so what kind of crab is that?
It's Dungeness crab.
Okay. Wow. And what's like in Florida, each person can have 6 stone crab traps. You don't have to be a commercial fisherman to have that. So like a little family can have, my wife could have 6, my kid could have 6, I could have 6, that's 18. That's plenty. To give us stone crabs. What's the regulation out there?
2 pots per person.
Okay.
But it's a 15 crab limit each day per person. So, if 2 guys go out, we typically tuna fish out of a 23-foot center console just because it's really efficient to get out there. And sometimes we'll just drop 2 crab pots, but they're big commercial style ones.
Oh yeah.
But if you get, if 2 guys bring in 30 Dungeness, the Dungeness are big. The limits, they got to be 6 inches across the back. So it's a lot of crab meat.
Yeah. You don't eat the bodies, do you? Or do you?
Well, not the shell, of course, but the body, the legs and the body's some of the best part to me. It's a little more work.
When you go to Red Lobster, you only get the legs of the Dungeness crabs. They keep the body meat for themselves. Probably. Yeah. That's what the fishermen do.
Yeah.
And so, with the crab traps, what's the season?
It depends on where you're at. Like the Puget Sound is its own whole deal. There's a lot of summer crabbing there. The prime season for the commercial guys, when the crab are the best, so they're the biggest and they have nice full shells after they've molted. So the commercial season on the Oregon coast is, they say, any month with an R in it. Right. So, but usually the peak is right in the winter, December, January, February. So all the schools around here, like, our local school up on the mountain has a fundraiser every year, crab feed. So we live kind of remote up on the mountain, and the school will run over on a Sunday and pick up all the crab. They pre-sell all the tickets. And we have a big crab feed up on the mountain. It's always in like the third week of January. That's the peak.
Nice. They just cook them up right there outdoors, and everybody comes by.
Yeah. Well, actually, they cook them at the crabbery for us.
Yeah.
We've done them both ways. It's easier for them to cook them, and then we bring them out. If people want them hot, they just throw them in a hot water boil. Most people eat them cold.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic. And we crab all summer while we're tuna fishing. So our tuna season usually runs mid-July through late September. And we'll always drop pots on the way out. And
the tuna that you're catching, is that yellowfin?
Nope, it's albacore.
Albacore. Right on. And that's cool. How big do those get where you are?
It's really interesting. I'm trying to learn more about them. There's worldwide, I think it's one of the few fisheries a lot of people agree is currently sustainable. And my personal understanding and belief is that, we don't catch them big here. If we catch 25 to 30 pounders, we're really excited. But you catch a lot of them when you get into them, which is the exciting part of it. And I personally think the reason is that for whatever reason, when they're in the Pacific, up the northern Pacific here, we're really just catching juvenile fish. And I think that could be part of the reason it's somewhat sustainable is you're not catching, breeding stock essentially. I know albacore can get big. It's just that we never see them big here.
Yeah. So does anyone fish for them commercially?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so what's the method that is allowed to fish albacore commercially?
They'll do different methods, but most of them put out a big troll spread. And when they hit on the troll, they'll stop the troll, chum the water, and live bait fish with what they call jack poles.
Oh yeah.
They also hand line them. So they'll have, a bunch of hand lines out on girdies, not really girdies, but spools. And they literally just, once they get a school to the boat feeding, there's one guy just constantly chumming. And then these guys run jack poles, which I have one here. They're 8-foot solid fiberglass sticks. They're like you ever heard of tenkara?
Yeah.
Japanese tenkara fishing?
Yeah.
Okay, well, a jack pole is nothing more than that. It's a super stout, with a long wrapped handle, almost like a rail rod they use in Southern California. And it's got a long 8 or 9 foot, about the same length as the pole, leader solid tied to the end with a live bait hook.
Yeah.
And they literally just take it like this, stick it in the water. And when a fish hooks, they just like this, and it's called a jack pole because they jack it into the boat like that and swing it up into the guy that's unhooking them and throwing them in the holds. They just literally just jack them like that.
Yeah. I've seen the videos, man. That looks like that would be a great job for a college wrestler or someone in the summer, like somebody that really likes to lift weights and do things like that. I mean, but there's definitely a technique to it. It's almost like you can see somebody that's really good at it. And if you look at these old videos, you can see lots of people that are really good at it, but you'll see two people standing next to one another, and one of them will be slightly better than the other. And it's almost like a pole vault pole, to where they wait just a second and let that jack pole get just slightly loaded. And then when they come back, it unloads and it basically shoots the fish behind them over their shoulder, where the guy next to them is not using the same technique and he's trying to muscle them in, and they barely clear the rail and they end up behind them. Yeah. But you see that guy that's good at it, and man, it's like a cartoon. It's like, woo, absolutely. Woo. And then I guess you have, I've always wondered about this. I've never actually talked to anybody that's done that type of fishing, but it looks like some of them are just shaking their what looks like a giant fly. Because there's no bait on it. So what is there, like feathers on it?
Yep.
Okay.
They'll use different things.
They just kind of shake it and it comes out. So that led me to believe that some of them might be barbless or whatever. And then they just go right back in without anybody unhooking them. Like, is there a technique to getting that hook out? Do you use a barbless hook?
There's got to be. I don't jack pole. I have one because every year we're like, we're going to jack pole some this year just for fun. Of course, the danger of doing it on a 23 or 25 foot boat is you hook your buddy in the back of the head, right?
Right. Oh, that was fun.
But So there's a group called the Ilwaco Tuna Club. It's a really cool scene out in Ilwaco, which is at the mouth of the Columbia. And those guys, little digression here, if you don't mind. The tuna scene here is pretty neat.
Yeah.
There's a Netflix series called Battlefish.
Okay. I've seen that promoted. I haven't seen it yet, though.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's one of these reality shows. They dramatize a little bit, but some guys that I know are in the show. And essentially, the show is about the commercial tuna fishery out of Ilwaco, Washington. So Ilwaco, Washington is the nearest town to the Columbia Bar, where the Columbia River exits and goes into the Pacific. And it's a really cool little town, super long history of commercial fishing there. And then the U.S. Coast Guard's Extreme Boat Piloting School is right there, because the Columbia Bar is one of the roughest ones in the world.
Wow.
And if you ever want some fun YouTube videos of the Columbia Bar Coast Guard pilot boats, self-righting boats. So they take them out in the Columbia Bar and they'll flip these, 40-foot rescue boats. And the guys, they're tethered onto the boat and they just hang on till the boat comes back upright.
Wow.
And then it's Coast Guard. It's pretty cool to watch. Anyways, so Battlefish is really about what they've got is they feature 4 or 5 commercial tuna boats. And all of them except for one are your traditional big old, steel, kind of gnarly, what you would picture the old commercial fishing boat, right? And what they do is they'll go out sometimes for up to a week. They've got, refrigerated, quick freeze units below, and they can hold tons of fish. Well, a group of guys that were primarily sport fishermen started doing what they call dayboat tuna. And so they run a 40-foot Dorado that they converted with triple outboards. It's got 3 300s on it, I think. And they go just for the day. So they run out, fish tuna, come back in. They have their own little processing house. And then that night, it gets delivered to restaurants throughout the Northwest. And then they also pack and can and dry fish and sell it at local markets around the Northwest. And so this show kind of focuses on the drastic difference between these guys doing the dayboat tuna program, the traditional commercial fishermen. And they definitely got kind of shunned quite a bit by the commercial guys, because here was these guys, that's rich guys in this fancy speedboat. But what they're doing is pretty cool, because it's raised awareness of our local food source, the albacore tuna, in that season. When you go to your local grocery store, any canned tuna that's labeled white tuna is albacore. Most people, even in the Northwest, had no idea that we have this incredible tuna fishery here, right? So it's like a lot of other things in the food industry. There's a great movement, with beef and pork and chicken, the whole farm to table thing.
Yeah.
People buying from local producers. And this particular effort of a group called Trayfin Foods is specifically changing awareness of this local food source that we have here in the Northwest. So it's really kind of a neat thing. The show's
changing awareness and making people value it more.
Correct.
Kind of like farmers market food from the local farms versus commercially produced Walmart food or something. People are valuing it more. And does that make the price go up?
Oh, naturally. It's like when you go to, it's like, go to nice restaurants here in the Northwest, and most of them serve seasonal, local sourced food, right? And that's typically a little more expensive. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people see the value in that.
So these guys that started going out and doing the dayboat tuna, was the idea that they were going to kind of beat the market as these other boats were going out there and fishing for a week and bringing in week-old fish? These guys were going out and doing it in one day and bringing in fresher fish? Or was it that they didn't want to go out there for a week?
No, it was the former, the first thing. I think ultimately they are hoping they can make money doing it, right? Because the world we live in runs by money. But I think that their original, I'm speaking for them now, I guess, but my understanding is they really wanted to do something different and make fresh seafood more available locally to people who live where the food is caught. Because most commercial fisheries probably go to canneries and big processors and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so a boat like that, how many can they bring in?
Good question. I don't know. I'll have to ask those guys that. They actually run some Burnewiin on that 40-foot Dorado, so I talk to them pretty regularly.
Yeah.
they use our Burnewiin mounts specifically. They also have some long line permits. So when the long line season hits, they put all their long line hauling gear, which is big hydraulic gear, snaps it into their Burnewiin mounts. They
Really?
long line fish for like black cod, and then they pull that off and go do their tuna fishery.
Man,
right?
that has to be a real testimony for the strength. I mean, that sounds like some heavy gear.
It is. You should see this stuff. It's pretty amazing. A company in Astoria makes all this long lining gear commercially for the commercial guys. It's neat stuff. But I think that, for them, their permits are all based on total poundage. So I don't think that their daily take is limited by their permit. Their total season is limited by their poundage.
Yeah.
Their daily take is limited by how much they can handle physically, but also how much they can responsibly cool correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Albacore has to be on ice immediately. And so for us, like in our 23-foot center console, my buddy and I fish that boat, and recreationally you can keep 25 tuna a day. But honestly, really all we can bring in on that boat that we can ice properly, so to take care of the meat, is about, probably depending on the size, 25 fish.
Yeah.
Which honestly, two guys bringing in 25 tuna is, you got to figure out who to give it to so that you can convince your wife
that's
to
a lot.
go next weekend again.
I mean, 25 pound tuna, that's a lot, a whole lot.
Well, and we have seasons, it varies, like 2 years ago and 3 years ago, all up and down the Oregon, Washington coast, everybody was catching 9-pound albacore on average. It's like all of a sudden 1 year is just all 9-pounders for some reason.
Wow. Does that, when something like that happens, do the scientists rush in, or who's in charge of, who would you even go to? What agency would be somebody that would know what's going on, or put some scientists on that?
In the Northwest, probably like other places, it's complex. The tuna fishery is kind of an international issue.
Yeah. Well, same on the other side of the United States. I was talking to some people up in Maine, and it was the same thing. It's like, well, Canada wants to do this one thing, and then the United States wants to do the other. They can't make a decision. So basically the fish are just getting pounded.
Well, it's kind of the opposite here. Typically they default to more conservative-minded, conservation-minded regulations. And let's take salmon, for example. You've got Canada, you got BC as a province. Mm-hmm. You've got Washington, you've got Oregon, you've got the Pacific Fisheries Commission, and then you've got all of the native tribes, and then the Native Council that represents all of them. Okay. And a salmon, like when we fished up the west coast of Vancouver, which we should be there this week, but we couldn't go this year for obvious reasons. This time of year, all the fish we catch up there are Columbia River run salmon. But yet you're fishing Canadian regulations, right? So then you've not only that, but you've got all these different agencies and states, but then you also have the sport fishing concerns, and you've got the commercial fishing concerns and gill netters. There's still a gill net commercial season on the Columbia River. The natives, the tribes, have tribal fishing rights up and down the Columbia River. So just last week, they just closed Steelhead on the Columbia, but the last couple of days, all of a sudden, all the native gill nets were out all up and down the river. Really? So once that happens, it's your numbers just drop dramatically. So, and then, fishing here in the Columbia, so we're about 100 and some miles upriver from the ocean. But those fish, like the upriver brights, they're going all the way up into Idaho, and who knows where these little rivers. So really, they're their fish, right? So do they then have a say in how we fish here, which arguably they probably should? It's a very complex equation.
Yeah, it sounds like it. The native fishing, when they're using the gill nets like that, are they doing something commercially with that, or is that just for their own use, or what does that look like?
Both. So, there's the argument for that season, of course, is part of it is historical subsistence fishing. But most of them that I know do it commercially as well. So there's fish processing houses up and down the Columbia that they sell their fish to. And, you can go and buy fish there, and then they'll sell it commercially. And, there's a fish processing house just 3 doors down from us here on the Columbia.
Wow.
So both. Yeah.
that with so many politics involved in that, and so many different like ingredients, like you've got the dams, then you've got different types of fishing, like the gill nets, and then I'm sure plenty of other commercial deals. Then you've got all of the international politics, the state politics, all of the things that you just kind of described quickly. What, as someone who lives out there, what do you think is the future bright for the salmon? Is it difficult to kind of understand what's going on for anyone, or like what's the status?
I think it's I don't think it's dismal, but I think that to hope that the future is bright is of course, what does bright mean? Bright for the guy who likes to go out and sport fish for him, for 2 fish for his family, or bright for the whatever. I do know this, if you really study it, it's a difficult equation that I don't know if mankind will ever be able to really balance out, because we have created a river now that was this, world-class dynamite, incredibly huge, high water flow river that had rapids and everything on it. And now it's a slow moving river that's on average much warmer than it would have been naturally. And some of these fish have to get upriver 1,000 miles, up into their tributaries. So, you've got people that are calling for removal of all dams, which I guess if you think about it, it'd first probably be good for the fish, actually.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's practical. There's so many potential downsides to that. And then, we've got other political forces, like there's a resident herd of orca whales that live in the Puget Sound around the San Juan Islands. And there's tour boats that go watch them, and they've got them all named. They've been there for a long time. There's some numbers that show that they're on the decline. The theory is that they're short of food and they eat salmon primarily. So those people who are in favor of the orca whales up in the Puget Sound area, which by boat from here is 300-400 miles, are calling for the removal of dams way up the Columbia River, because those are typically the fish that they're eating, right?
Yeah.
So it gets so complex that I don't know if anybody really that was truly objective about it. And, I always try to just back up and look at perspective, forget about the details a little bit. I think it's unreasonable to think that we can actually satisfy every need out there. So then, just thinking about the theory of it, do you have to just decide which interests you ignore? There are people who would argue and claim, maybe rightly, that all we got to do is make whatever's right for the salmon, and we have to adapt to what that is. But then the question is, how do you determine that?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Is it even practical to think that you can, practical is one thing, whatever. Is it at all realistic to think that you could get rid of the dams? I mean, some dams obviously don't have development. Some dams might be a good candidate, but some other ones, I would think that it would be very, very difficult to do that based upon cities and towns that have been built nearby. Like, is that even a possibility in some, even if it was voted upon, could you do that?
I think logistically it'd be tough. I mean, you look at, so the Bonneville Dam was one of the first ones here, and that's between Portland and us, and that's the last dam on the Columbia. And the Bonneville Dam was built in the 30s, somewhere not too far from the Hoover Dam, maybe later by 10 years or something. And then the Dalles Dam, which is the next dam upriver from us about 20 miles, was just built in the 60s or something. And so it flooded a lot of native sacred grounds, like Celilo Falls was this incredible fall system in the Columbia River, and that whole village got buried, right, by the water. So if we just built that dam in the 60s, we certainly could figure out how to take it out, I guess.
Right. But
the impacts would be, I don't know what they would be. I mean, commercially, there's incredible traffic of barges transporting things up and down the river. I suppose arguably all the towns that remain would be way above high water now, so big deal. You lose a lot of ports, and like our local timber company here, it's a huge company, family owned. I mean, they have big facilities right on the river right next to us here that float rafts of logs down the river, as well as pulp. And so logistically, I think it's challenging. There's been a number of dams that have been removed on the tributaries. Just downriver from us here, the White Salmon River, which comes off of Mount Adams, about 8 or 9 years ago, they removed the Condit Dam, which was this incredible dam in this canyon. And it was quite a spectacular thing. You can find the video on YouTube, but they basically excavated below it, tunneled a big, maybe 10-foot diameter channel in the bottom of it until they were so thin walled down there that they blasted it. And it, within like 5 hours, drained the whole northwestern lake that had been formed in the 30s when it was built.
Did it take out the dam as it started going underneath the dam? Did it then take out the dam, or just continue to flow underneath it?
They then took the dam out. They left the powerhouse downriver because it's on the National Historic Register, but it doesn't disrupt the flow of the river. But it was a pretty spectacular project.
And so when something like that happens, you know, that you say that's a year ago?
That was like 8 years ago.
8 years ago. So fast forward to today, what does that look like?
Well, you know, the river now free flows from the mountain all the way to the mouth. So now, like, rafting companies, they all raft the whole river now through that canyon, where before it was just a lake, right?
Wow.
I know a lot of guys that go up there now and steelhead fish above where the dam was. Now there's steelhead that run up there. Whether they're breeding up there, I don't know. But there is evidence that there's been a return of the salmon runs up that river.
Wow. That's super cool.
That is cool in a way.
Yeah. But man, what an undertaking to do that.
And really what happened with that was, you know, the FERC, I guess it is, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they issue permits for dams. So I think it was Pacific Power that owned that dam, built in the 30s. They have a 99-year lease to have the dam there, and then they have to renew that lease. Well, that lease came up, and because of pressure from environmentalists, good or bad, the FERC put a bunch of new regulations on it to say, if you want to keep that dam in place and get it re-permitted, one of the things you have to do is put a fish ladder around it. Well, the cost of doing that, I mean, it wouldn't be impossible, but it was in this kind of slot canyon, are so incredibly high. And, you know, the amount of power they got out of that thing probably wasn't very significant. So it was really, it came down to, they forced a financial decision to remove it, right?
Right. That's where the most effective decisions usually come down to. I mean, when we look at the water issues in Florida, if it can come down to a financial decision to make a good decision for the environment, if it is also a good decision for the wallet, it sure is a lot easier to get it to push through. Like, absolutely. I mean, when it makes sense, that's what the guys from like Captains for Clean Water, they've done a really good job of that. Is like every time that there's an issue, it's not just fishermen fighting for this issue or whatever. They bring in everybody, restaurant owners, real estate agents, all kinds of people that either live or die by the health of the water, whether they know it or not, and then explain it to them. Like, look, if the beaches are ugly and dirty, nobody's coming. And if nobody comes, then the house that you're trying to sell is worth half of what it was worth. Oh, yeah, this is a really important issue, you know? Yeah. But sometimes that's what it takes to get people to understand what's going on. It sounds like the same kind of thing out there. Do those fish ladders, do they work? I mean, obviously they do.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You can go to the Bonneville Dam, and like anytime anybody visits, I take them over there, and you can go down inside the spillway of the dam, and they've got it's like set up like a theater seats and everything, and the whole wall is glass. Cool. And you watch the salmon swim by going up the fish ladder. It's just like a series of, it's like all these chicanes, right? Yeah. And then they have a room, so you can go online anytime you want and look up what are called the 7-day fish counts, and you can see every day. So that's what we use as fishermen to gauge the fish runs. So you can pull it up on the website. It'll list every dam that they do that up to Columbia, all the species of fish and how many went through that day, and they can look at the history. So
how are they counting that? Is that an automated system, or is someone sitting there counting those fish?
No, there's people that sit there.
That's what I thought.
They have, it's like an aircraft control center room. They sit in there and they have windows the fish have to swim by, and they sit there and have tickers, and they get, they're really educated on identifying the fish by the shapes. Sure. They just tick them off. And it's incredible because right now we have the American shad running going, which are non-native. But just last week, we were up to 500,000 shad a day coming through the Bonneville Dam.
Wow. How big do your shad get?
They'll be like, we do this time of year, we go fish for them, some just for fun, but we use them a lot for sturgeon bait and crab bait. Yeah. And because they're the largest herring species is what they are. There's a herring, they're a herring. But you can bank fish for them below the dams, just like a little tiny shad dart. You pitch out with a piece of pencil lead and drift fish, just like drift fishing for salmon or steelhead.
Yeah.
And you can catch 50, 60 of them in an hour and a half.
Wow.
And they're typically like 3 to 6 pounds probably.
Yeah. We have shad on the East Coast as well. And they can be really good fighters. They jump like a little tarpon. And like you say, you can catch a ton of them. That was my introduction when I was a kid. That was my introduction to a trash fish. When I went fishing with my grandfather, who was all about the largemouth bass. He just thought the largemouth bass was everything, and he wanted to be a professional fisherman, even though he wasn't all that good. He was a jeweler by trade, and he wanted to be a professional bass fisherman. He definitely did better to stay in the jewelry business than in the bass fishing business. But anyway, I went fishing with him, and I catch this awesome fish. It was the best fish we caught all day. It jumped, it ran. I'd never had heard my drag pull like that. You get it in, and he's like, it's an old shad. Throw it up on the bank. And I was like, why? This thing is the coolest fish ever. Like none of the other fish did this. And now I understand it's non-native and all that. But that was my introduction to trash fish. Like, and so many people call all different kinds of fish trash fish. Jack crevalles, barracudas, all kinds of sharks, things like that are trash fish. But man, they are day makers more often than not. Like you go out there, not every day do you go out there and catch a bunch of bonefish, but you can stop by the Jack crevalle spot and catch, 5 or 6 of those, and somebody goes home super happy. Same thing with a nurse shark. Like most people come to the Keys, they've never even seen a shark before. They catch a nurse shark, and you can either play it up for them and be like, hey, cool, look at that. And things like 8 feet long. That's a huge shark. Or you can be like, it's a nurse shark, But I mean, and that reaction right there is the difference between them feeling like, wow, I caught this shark. Or I guess I caught a nurse shark, like almost embarrassed about it, but
it's interesting. I think that's where guides, like I've had some experiences with guides down in the Keys of all different sorts. And I think that's where it's important that they gauge their customers' experience and interest.
Right.
Because in a way, oftentimes they may be taking somebody out who really doesn't, they just want to be on the water and catch some fish. So in that case, they should just say, wow, that is really awesome. Was that fun?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
And
we're going to throw him back because he's no good eating, but we're going to throw him back.
Yeah.
Take some pictures.
It's like the customer's always right. Like if they are happy and having a good time, awesome. Let's do it. But I think a lot of people they don't want to go back to the dock and say, well, we caught 3 nurse sharks and not look so good to their guide buddies. Nobody in the Keys,
no guides in the Keys want to be known as the nurse shark guide, right?
No, but if you got a small family and you just got a $500 tip because you caught 3 nurse sharks and you made it sound like they were pretty cool.
Right.
It's all about your priorities.
Hey, so speaking of captains for clean water, I just recently watched I don't remember what show it was, but it was a show. They were talking about the whole Everglades system. Yeah. I know that's its own whole subject, but I'm just kind of fascinated by it. I spent a bit of time in Southwest Florida. And then years ago, I used to spend 2 weeks every winter in the Keys, camping at Bahia Honda and back in the 80s, fishing and diving and stuff, And I was always fascinated by the Everglades, but I never really realized how big of an issue that really is. And I understand in this show I watched, there's an issue with the sort of natural flow of fresh water towards the south into the Everglades that spills out into the saltwater.
Yep.
That's something I'm interested in learning more about.
Kind of like the Captains for Clean Water guys really helped me to fully understand the situation, or I don't know if I fully understand it, but I understand it a lot better. And it's interesting that if you're a guide or an angler or someone that lives at the mouth of the Caloosahatchee River, where I'm talking about on the west coast of Florida, or on the other coast where you have Okeechobee is sending water out both sides of the state, right? Yep. And if you're a person that lives there and you never go to the Everglades, then there's one problem with the Everglades and Okeechobee is that effluent and fertilizer and all kinds of stuff is exiting out, going out of Okeechobee, and they're pushing it out the Caloosahatchee River and out the other side, and it's creating algae blooms and all kinds of things where you get this water that shouldn't be going out. First of all, it's way too much fresh water. It's never designed to be that much. And then you have, in some cases, a lot of other things that will create algae blooms and accentuate red tide and all kinds of other problems, right? So if you live in those areas, that's the problem. Well, if you live in the Florida Keys, those problems are not really in your world. Like they're just not part of what you see on a daily basis. Occasionally you'll get kind of an algae bloom and it might be some of that water coming down, moving south. But the big problem for the people that like to fish the Flamingo area and, in the Florida Keys is that Okeechobee used to have, it used to be called the River of Grass. Like it was a laminar flow, very shallow, that flowed across almost the entire state of Florida south. And water would bubble up, water would be channeled through things, and it would move south, and it would go into the Everglades area that if you come down and fish with us, that's the area we're going to take you to. Flamingo, all of this Cape Sable area right there. And that area should be getting a constant flow of fresh water. But because of roads, dikes, dams, many different other kind of projects that I don't even know what they are, that water has stopped. The water has not been allowed to flow south, almost completely shut down. So what happens is if you've ever had a saltwater aquarium, if you put saltwater in that aquarium and everything's beautiful and you have your tropical fish swimming around, and then you let that go for a month, 2 months, evaporation happens. The water continues to get saltier and saltier and saltier and saltier as the fresh water is evaporated out until the coral inside of your fish tank dies, until the fish die, until everything dies. And so there's really two problems with the Everglades. One, when it rains too much and you have too much water, they have to send the water out the side. Okay. Then at the same time, the water is not flowing south as it's supposed to. So there's two unnatural flows. One, a disruption of flow, and second, a way increased flow going out both sides. And to my friends at Captains for Clean Water, I hope I have explained that correctly, because it is, I'll almost use the word funny, but it is kind of a weird situation that people that are very close to it, and you would think that everybody that's associated with fishing would understand what the problem is in the Everglades, but that's not necessarily true, because the problem is the problem that you see. What is making your beach dirty? Why are these dead fish washing up on your beach? And then you focus on that problem and you don't realize that, yes, there's too much fresh water here, but there's no fresh water here. And it's creating incredible salinity, which is killing the turtle grass and killing fish and killing all kinds of stuff going south. So you have to do a couple of things. You have to create like what they're talking about. And the solution to this has already been voted on, and the money's there, and it's all good to go. They just have to actually do it. And there are these big retention ponds where they can create these areas where they can settle that water and then send it south more gradually. And they've already been removing some bridges and dams and all kinds of things to get more water moving south. So there is progress. And one of the things that I think has been the best, at least for my understanding of it, is that the Captains for Clean Water guys were the first people for me to explain to me that there is a solution. And and not only is there a solution, but it's already been decided on. There's a plan. It's already been out there. And all we have to do is implement it. Right. And in order to implement it, what really needs to happen is people need to understand what these problems are and understand that there is a solution, and then ask the representative to fight for them. Like, water is important, and we want the Everglades to be better than it has ever been. And, when I talk to those guys, I can see that, yes, there is a path to where the Everglades in our lifetime could be better than it's ever been in our lifetime. And we can leave it better for our grandchildren than we ever saw it. And it's there. I mean, there's plenty of water. It falls out of the sky every day. So where does that water go, and how is it channeled, and does it have a lot of fertilizer and other things in it? Those are the things that, that's kind of the issue. But I mean, there's a lot of issues, but it is, at least to me, it is relieving to understand that a lot of smart people have spent their entire life creating this plan, and it can be done. I mean, it can be done. It
comes back to the money thing you mentioned though too, right? Somehow you've got to figure out how to pay for that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the money's supposed to be there. When it comes time to do it, we'll see if it's there.
Well, I think we should go see that stuff you were talking about from the Keys next time I'm down there.
Yeah. Well, that's easy. We go straight north out of Hawks Cay. You can run straight across to Flamingo. You can do it from Islamorada. I used to even run over there from Key West, and you don't want to do that. That's too far. But we'll do it from Marathon or from Hawks Cay. It's not a bad run at all. But yeah, I'd love to show you that, and then you can see, the Everglades is a beautiful spot, and given a chance, probably just like your river out there where they took the dam away, and now people are up there fishing, and probably the deer and all the land animals are probably coming back, and the vegetation's probably coming back. I mean, 8 years, I'm sure it is. And then all you got to do is give it a chance. And that's the same thing with the Everglades, man. If you get some fresh water in there and you let nature kind of do its thing, you won't believe how fast it'll come back. That's my opinion anyway.
Well, I agree. I think, in some ways we see evidence of that out here. I always say this, if we just gave up tomorrow, trying to manage everything, Mother Nature would reclaim pretty quickly in her time frame, right?
Yeah.
I think we humans, we always think in terms of our lifespan. So let's say we live on average 80 years or whatever. That seems like a lifetime, but that's just a blip really in time.
Yeah.
You go hiking around here and find some of the old highways that cut through the gorge or up in the mountains. And we may have abandoned those and stopped maintaining them 20 years ago. And they're just decimated and overgrown, and the concrete's broken up. And that 20 years is just a blip of time.
Oh yeah.
Mother Nature time.
It's a complete blip in time. And then, all of that is going to be something to be looked at in a year from now. Like 2020 has been a really strange year, and it's been a really strange year in outdoor recreation because, national parks have been closed in a lot of places. We've got, in a lot of places, there's been less than average boat traffic. I mean, and substantially less. So what is this going to mean this time next year? Are we going to see a giant boom in some fisheries? Like, I wouldn't doubt it. There's been a lot of places where there's been virtually no pressure for the first time in 40 years, 50 years, and there's nobody there. And it's at a time usually when the fishing's really good. And I don't know. I think that's going to be interesting too. Like when this thing first started, I started talking to one of my friends, Robert Trossett, and he was saying, this whole thing is just like a reset for Mother Nature. And I was like, that's a good way to look at it. Like you take the pressure off and see what happens.
Yeah.
And he was
that's
saying
an interesting perspective. I don't totally disagree with that either.
Have you seen that the pressure, like on the salmon fishing during the COVID lockdown and everything, was like people weren't going or weren't able to go, or the marinas were closed or
yeah, there was actually quite a bit of that. Like we keep our boat, we fish the coast over at the coast, and we had it. In fact, we still have it back here right now, refitting some electronics. And actually, during the first part of the halibut season, a couple things. Oregon wasn't letting non-residents fish in Oregon, so we live right on the border, so I fished both. And then also, most of the marinas on the coast, their boat ramps were just completely closed. I mean, they had them concrete utility blocked off. And kind of what happened was right after Washington, Oregon put the statewide shutdown mandates on, that next weekend, all these little coastal towns were just absolutely flooded with people. And, all the coastal towns here in the Pacific are real small towns, right? There's no big towns on the coast, and they're villages essentially. And they were inundated with people. And so the mentality there was, of course, well, shoot, if we can't go anywhere, why should all these people come out and be cluttering up our town this weekend if there's concerns?
Yes.
Whether people believed in the concerns or not, or what level they believed in them. And I totally got it, right? It's like all of a sudden, Highway 101 through these little coastal towns was bumper to bumper cars, right? So in some ways that was a bummer for us because we were trying to get our boat back out to our slip. But for the most part, I think people have been responsible about it. And, we find when we go fish, we go out, hop on the boat early morning, fish all day, come home tired, and hang out with the same guys we fished with pretty much. And
Yeah.
we'll see how it plays out later this summer. We're kind of itching though, because tuna are on their way, and that's within a month now of our season. So we'll see.
Well, the fish are they're going to be out there, and if there's less pressure, I think it's going to be pretty good. I think that the pressure
that's a good thing for sure.
If you relieve the pressure, then the fish are going to respond. But anyway, man, I enjoyed it, Tom. This has been great. How would people find your company, your products? How can they follow you on social media?
It's pretty easy. So our company name is Burnewiin. It's kind of a strange one to pronounce and spell. It's BURN, just like burn, and then EWIIN, Burnewiin.com. And same name for Instagram, Facebook. We don't do a ton of social media, but we do try to do some pretty nice Instagram stuff, just making people aware of the range of boaters and boats and applications that we appeal to. And, we're pretty new down in the Southeast, really brand new. I mean, working with you and Rich and discovering some of the advantages just for some particular fishing applications down there has been great for us. But we'd also like to, work as much as we can down there to make people aware of sort of the broad range of applications that we offer, not just for fishing. And then personally, I'm kind of on a bent to get my cousin in Naples or on Marco Island to get his flats boat going. And we're going to experiment with some products on some flats boat setups too. So if any of your listeners have a flats boat they want to experiment with, we would be looking for somebody to partner up with, seeing what we can do there.
Yeah. Well, one of the best things I've seen is the way that you can put a fillet table there, because usually the fillet tables that I've had that go on a rod holder are not the most rigid piece of equipment. And you never want to be cutting on your really expensive boat. So that's a good one. The way that
that is a good application. For certain fisheries, here, of course, we bait fish a lot for salmon. And it's great to have a bait prep station, and we'll run one on a transom. So we have a rigging station, and then it comes with a couple of our mounts in the upper corners. So you can get a couple of flat lines out the back that get up and over your outboards, and you can articulate them really well for trolling, but also just for a bait prep station. And then honestly, we have a lot of people who use them, that aren't just strict fishing boats. They'll have their cocktail spread out on that.
Of course they will.
Barbecue up in the upper corner, and our knives all integrate with our mounts.
Yeah, so that's super cool.
It's a pretty slick setup. Yeah. And so it's for us, we sell primarily through boat dealers. We don't really have a dealership network too broadly in Florida yet. We're working with a couple of key new dealers down there. I'll be down setting up a Grady White fisherman later this summer for one of our dealers up in the Great Lakes who has a place in Isla Mirada, and they keep a boat down there. So we're going to get that all decked out. And of course, you and Rich have experienced it on your 26-foot yellowfin. So check us out. And we're really keen on customer service. We love talking to customers. Everybody hates it because when I get with customers, I end up talking forever about fishing and boats, and I like learning from them, right?
Yeah.
So don't hesitate to contact us. You'll probably get to me.
Okay. There you go. You can tell a fish story.
Yeah. And then also, you should definitely, I know you have some history in Montana.
Yeah.
You should definitely try to get out here, and depending on the season, we can fish tuna, Dungeness, oversized sturgeon's fun right out in front of our warehouse here. We can drop for oversized sturgeon and
what's an oversized sturgeon?
Oversized meaning they're above the slot limit for keeping.
What is the slot?
The slot's, I think, 38 to 52 inches.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
I don't want to keep one. I would love one day, and I only need to catch one of these, but I would like to catch one of those really big sturgeon. That would be
they're incredible.
Awesome. Yeah.
We anchor up in about 125 feet of water, and then we send a whole shad to the bottom on a 48-ounce lead on a slider.
Yes.
And sit and wait and hook up. And then when they hook up, we drop the anchor. So we use anchor balls so you can release the anchor off the boat and drift with the fish.
Yes.
But it's not uncommon at all right out in front of our warehouse here to catch 10 to 11 footers.
Really? And like, would you expect like a good day is to hook one, or do you hook multiples, or what?
Multiples. A good day, this time of year is kind of the best time for it because the shad are running and they love that food source. But so if we go out, we'll typically go in the morning. It's nice because it's between our prime salmon seasons, so there's not a lot else going on other than bass, which is really fun here. Smallmouth.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, really? I love smallmouth.
It's crazy. It's
is that the John Day River? Is that the one?
Yeah, the John Day is just up.
Because I know that's an incredible smallmouth fishery, but maybe you even have a better one.
It is. So the John Day. Well, anyways, the sturgeon though, we run out of the marina, anchor up, and you sit there anchored. And last summer, the first day we did it, my father-in-law and I, we brought 7 fish that were over 7 feet long to the boat in the first 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now you can go get skunked too. It's fishing, right?
Well, of course.
That would be a good day. A bad day was you get skunked. A typical days you might get 1 to 3, but a good day you'll get. I mean, you get tired, right? It's a fight.
Yeah.
And these fish, I've got video of that particular day. These things are 10.5. This one was 10.5 feet exactly. We measured it. You can't get them in the boat, right? You're not supposed to anyways. Right. But this thing comes completely out of the water. So you're watching your line, it's down like this, and the rod just bent, right? And all of a sudden the line starts doing this. And you're like, it's going to jump, and it'll, however far out there is that 10.5 foot fish will come completely out of the water.
Wow, that's super
shaking
cool.
Its head. It is cool.
Awesome. They have that weird mouth too. They
do.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Well, I'm going to come to Montana a couple of times this summer and then again in the fall. So hopefully we'll make that work out.
Yeah. So the bass, real quick, the bass fishery, it's the smallmouth bass are non-native here, so they're considered invasive. There's really no limit or season. You can fish them during the spawn. We fish the main stem of the Columbia a lot when there's nothing else going on. It's just a calm day and you go fish the shores, and it's really an incredible fishery. There's gotten to be bass tournaments now all up and down the river. But the John Day is really neat. It's the John Day River flows through the high mountain desert east of here. That's on the Oregon side. And you can boat up the mouth of it from the Columbia quite a ways in a power boat up to the Narrows where there's falls. And that's a really good bass fishery. But the really neat thing there for a guy like you who likes the Montana scene is either drift boat or more commonly raft fishing the upper stretches of the Deschutes. Yeah. So buddies of mine, they'll do 3-day floats down the Deschutes fly fishing for smallmouth.
Wow. Now, where is that part of the Deschutes? Now, I know the Deschutes is also a good trout river, right? And Steelhead. So is it in the same area where you're fishing trout and steelhead and smallmouth in the same area?
Yeah. So the Deschutes River is about 40 miles east of here. It's the Columbia. It's on the Oregon side. The Deschutes flows through Bend, which is a pretty popular kind of mountain town, desert town. And then about another maybe 15 to 20 miles east of that is the John Day River. And the John Day comes out of sort of the eastern Oregon wheat fields and canyons. Pretty different rivers. The Deschutes, I think, is quite a bit bigger river. Mm-hmm. John Day from this time of year on is a super skinny float, which is why it's mostly rafts, not drift boats. Yeah. But the John Day is a little more known for smallmouth fishing, and the Deschutes probably kind of your more premier trout and steelhead fishery.
Wow. That sounds terrific. Yeah. That sounds terrific. I'd love to see that, man. I've never fished for smallmouth out that way. And I grew up fishing for smallmouth.
Did you? It's fun, man. It's a blast. Everybody's so focused on salmon here. I've been here for 26 years, never smallmouth fished until just a few years ago. I'm like, wait, I caught a smallmouth doing something. I don't know. And it's super fun. It's a great one to take kids out on too. Yeah, because you catch a lot of them, or absolutely.
Because a lot of places, I mean, you don't always catch a lot of smallmouth. I mean, they don't act like that universally. Like I know that there's some places, like if I've heard a ton of people that go to the boundary waters in Canada, and it's every single cast, you're catching a smallmouth. And then, but where I grew up, it was harder, like to catch smallmouth, and partly because they were mixed in with largemouth and other fish too. Right. But it was a little. You certainly didn't catch them every cast. Right. But there's some places where you can get them. And then I know some other people that are getting them, on the interior there, like in Idaho and other places where it can be really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Wisconsin. I spent a lot of time in the Boundary Waters. In my young days, I spent a lot of my fishing time on Lake Michigan salmon fishing. But when I was a kid, we get in from salmon fishing, and the Chinook fishery then was so off the hook. It's like you always got your limit, and we're in by mid-morning. But what we were excited about as kids was we'd get in from salmon fishing, and we'd get right out on that little aluminum boat in the bays around Washington Island and smallmouth fish.
Nice.
You do it all afternoon just catching fish,
Yeah, that's cool.
And, we didn't know it at the time, but of course, to be catching mid 30-pound Chinook every morning is like super spectacular. But what we really got excited about was being in our own little boat fishing smallmouth.
Yeah, it's funny. That's the way a kid thinks. I mean, we were just talking. Who was I talking to? Captain Scott Brown. He was talking about his kid that's in the Keys. He's raising two kids down there, but his son is great and is a really great little fisherman for being 4 years old, and he'll get him out, and he's caught, a handful of bonefish, and man, he could care less. All he wants to do is catch snappers. That's all he wants to do.
Right.
And he could care less if he catches a tarpon or a bonefish or anything that anybody else thinks is cool. If the thing doesn't have teeth and it's not cool looking, then he doesn't care about catching it. He wants to catch the snapper because it's like every other cast. And it's just funny how kids think, and then as
absolutely.
you get older, then you're like, well, you know what? That is actually the most fun.
It is fun. Tuna fishing, we take kids out once in a while, and it's a 2-hour run out, and then it's a long grind on the troll, locating schools. And inevitably, even the avid fishermen kids out there are like, can we go in and go bottom fishing for sea bass?
Yeah.
And you can't deny the fact, and in a way, it's way more fun.
Yeah. Well, I've made a lot of people happy with what we call trash fish over the years. Yeah. So I don't call any of them trash. I think anything that bends the rod's pretty awesome. But anyway. Yeah. All right, Tom. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And we'll have to make some of these plans come true. I'd love to do any of that smallmouth or sturgeon fishing, both of those. I'd love that. That'd be really super cool. So I will let you know when I'm headed to Montana. And if I don't get eaten by a grizzly bear, I'll head over.
Sounds good. And then I'll probably see you soon in the Keys.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right, Tom. That's Tom with Burnewiin. And we'll see you guys next week. All right. See ya.
Thanks a lot, Tom.